Alright, you lot, welcome back. I'm afraid we have more Space Marine news. You might have been sick of it yesterday. You might have been sick of Space Marine stuff when we were talking about the captain on bike. But more significant things have come to light, even than that, with the big Space Marines news article right here. Now, this news kind of comes in two forms, really, because you've got a change to the stats of your standard lad, and you've also got a bunch of stuff going to legends, or becoming legendary proxies, which, if you're not familiar with the term, we will cover that in a moment. But to start with, let's do the good, or at least the more good / interesting, and then do the bad, kind of. So, the new codex is on the way, obviously, and essentially, your lads, your basic rank and file Space Marines are becoming Strength 5, which is kind of interesting. I mean, it is increasing the whole, one-man army feel that Space Marines tend to have, and you get a bit more variety with your intercessor bolt rifles, 2 fire modes, one that's Strength 5 and one that's Strength 6. And your lads in Tacticus armour are also becoming Toughness 5. Now that by proxy has made Phobos stuff more interesting because they stay at Toughness 4, but they get to move more. Now to be honest, I quite like that because it means that your more armoured lads are tougher and your lighter armoured lads are faster, and frankly that makes sense from a narrative and design perspective when you're looking at the Space Marines in question. The Phobos lads look like they should be a lot quicker than the lads who are running around in the Tacticus plate, so that is all fine and that all makes sense. There is the whole thing of, is this not somewhat power creepy? Are we going to look at Space Marines, yes, becoming a more elite force, but still having the same numbers and therefore being horribly unbalanced when their codex drops? I mean, let's be honest, that could happen anyway, but they have said in the article right here that they want them to feel like the superhuman soldiers they're supposed to be, but it will also mean an increase in points values. So armies will be smaller, playing like elite strike forces from the lore. I'm pretty sure this is not the first time they've attempted this. I'm pretty sure it's not the first time they've claimed this, but they're doing it again. They have said that the points cost will be higher, so on paper, in theory, with all things being well, when the codex drops, it should be not terrible. It shouldn't be a case of, oh look, the army is the same size, but everything just hits harder and is harder to kill. On paper, in theory, should be fine. I mean, we gotta wait and see, haven't we? You just gotta wait and see. There's no way of telling whether they'll actually pull it off or whether it'll be a hot mess. All we can do is wait for people who actually know what they're talking about when it comes to the codexes, take a look, and, just see where consensus lies, which is half the fun of Games Workshop releasing stuff in new editions. It could be absolutely 10 out of 10. It could be that they've vastly misunderstood their own goal and done something weird. Not like that hasn't happened before either, is it? There's also the question of Heretic Astartes as well, and Codex Divergent chapters, so they've said they'll get similar boosts to bring them in line. For a minute, I was like, what do you mean similar boosts? What do you mean similar? And then I thought to myself, well, there is the fact that Heretic Astartes don't have Primaris stuff, and as such, the whole Tacticus plate thing, what? But also no Phobos armor either. But my assumption is that the basic lads will themselves become Toughness 5. They will also become Strength 5. That's my guess. And that is partially based on what they've said for the legendary proxy side of things, which we'll get to in a minute. Also, when it says Codex Divergent chapters, my reading of that is that it's not just Space Marine Divergent stuff. I would guess, or I would assume at least, that, your World Eaters, your Death Guard, your Emperor's Children, your Thousand Sons, they will also get similar changes to maintain the feel that they already have, whilst keeping them on par with the rest of the Heretic Astartes stuff, which is supposed to be on par with the actual loyalist side of things. I guess we'll just have to wait and see on that one. I would hope that that's what they're doing, but we'll see. We'll see. I feel like it would make sense. But again, there is somewhat of a history of things not making sense when it comes to decision making for Games Workshop. I mean, let's face it, I'm not suggesting they do that all the time, but there's just a few standout moments here and there where they've done something and you've gone, I'm sorry, what was the logic there? It's happened. I'm just saying, it's happened. But maintain optimism, all right? Let's keep a bit of an optimistic air," he says, as we're about to look at a list of stuff going into Legends. Okay, maybe cautious optimism. So, okay, right, look, this is the other thing, and I'm struggling with this a little bit, but perhaps not in the way that I think some people are. And my thing is that I've just been assuming that this will happen sooner rather than later. I remember being on a podcast with Mini Wargaming Dave, where we talked about Primaris versus Firstborn. I think it was not that long after Firstborn were given, like, the extra wound or whatever that, like, Intercessors or, like, Primaris Marines had, thus rendering the whole storyline of new and improved Space Marines, suddenly that didn't make any difference because the balance of the game kind of a big deal and made more sense to have them all be in line. And when that kind of happened, it was a case of, well, I mean, if they're just going to end up merging the stat lines anyway, my assumption was this stuff is not long for this world. Like, once there is a replacement for it, it will go, which is exactly the pattern that we've seen. Like, we've seen that happen repeatedly. When you look at the amount of stuff that's available for, like, Firstborn Space Marines now, I don't know whether you've noticed, but the amount of stuff has gone down quite a bit over the years. My assumption was that this sort of thing was going to happen way earlier. So the fact that it's happening now, there is a little part of me that's like, it's kind of a shame because a lot of this stuff is, like, iconic. It's the kind of thing that, I looked at when first getting into the game and thought, well, this absolutely rules. But it's also quite old by that standard as well, given that some of the things that are going away not really changed that much since 3rd edition when I started. So I'm surprised it's taken this long, as opposed to being surprised that they'd dare do it. However, like, having said all of that, it's also completely understandable to have a negative reaction to it, to not be happy about it. And this is where I think, like, the cognitive dissonance comes in, because when we look at the list, it's genuinely a bit of a shame because, Centurion Assault Squads, Devastator Squads, Razorback, Predator Destructor, Predator Annihilator, Vindicator. The Vindicator is a quality bit of kit. I love that kit. It looks solid. It is absolutely timeless. It's a genuine shame it's going. Like, I'm not happy it's gone. I'm not sitting there going, finally they've shipped off that old piece of crap. No, I don't want them to get rid of it. I don't want them to stop selling it, but it's been my assumption for a good few years that this was going to happen. And I think most of us were probably assuming the same thing, right? That eventually the Firstborn stuff was going to go away. I think it's one of those things that no matter how much you know or believe it's going to happen, when it does, it's still got that little sting of, no, that's kind of a shame, because it might be old, it might be that the writing has been on the wall for a while, but I still don't actually want to see it go, which I think is kind of where I'm at with it. But let's actually go through the list properly, right? That was a whole tangent. So the Tactical and Devastator and Suppressor Squads are becoming legendary proxies. Now, legendary proxies are not the same as going to Legends. So they effectively don't get Legends rules, but you can use them as their, as proxies for Intercessor Squad, Desolation Squad, and Inceptor Squad. And Pedro Cantor, bless him, is becoming a captain, as is Uriel Ventris. Now, the only downside to the legendary proxy side of things is that, of course, you can use them at home, in stores, whatever, but when it comes to, like, competitive events, they should only be used with the permission of the event organizer. Now, the proxies thing has been around for a while. I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, they did a big long list of stuff that had been, like, put into Legends, or was going into Legends or whatever, and they're like, okay, here is the name of the model, and here is what it can be counted as. Like, it was a big official list of proxy, like, equivalents. The thing is, my hope is that all people running events, like the TOs, will go, well, I mean, yes, using a tactical squad as an intercessor squad is obviously fine. Whether all of them would or will or want to do that, I don't know, but that's the only thing that I don't fully like about that. I feel like if it's a Warhammer competitive event, if it's something that feeds into like the tournament structure that Games Workshop themselves run, you should be able to just do it. It should be a case of, well, everyone knows this has happened. Or, you know, if you ask, what are you doing with the tactical squad? I'm pretty sure they're not in the codex. Just going, well, here is the thing that Games Workshop put out saying it is now an intercessor squad. And that should be the end of it. But it's not. It's down to individual discretion, which I'm sure in 99.9% of cases is absolutely fine. But it's that little room of, like, there's just a bit of... But there's a tiny bit of room for doubt there, which I'm hoping would just never come to anything, but it could do. This is the thing, I might not be a big competitive player myself, but, you know, if you show up to a tournament having put time and effort and energy into an army, and a good chunk of your army is tactical or devastator squads or whatever, and there is a thing that says, this is a legendary proxy unit, you can use this instead of intercessors, instead of devastators, and the person running the event then goes, actually no, that sucks. Like, whether you're competitive at heart or not, the amount of effort and time and work you've put into it, you still want to be able to use it. So that's the only thing, and that might just be me. I don't know, feeling like someone out there is going to be a bit of a wrong'un about it for no reason. Whereas I don't know that I've got any evidence for that. It's just it would be cool not to have that doubt, I feel, for those who want to continue using those units, you know? Anyway, so, on that list, the really surprising one is the Suppressor Squad. Now, it's weird because... I say surprising. Is it surprising? The Suppressor Squad is like the red-headed stepchild of Space Marine releases, in that it showed up in a big box, then it got moved to a smaller box. It has never been available as a standalone kit. It's always been bundled in with other stuff. And as such, my overriding curiosity or question is, how did they expect people to buy it? Like, if you're looking to pick up a Suppressor Squad, you're not going to want the Suppressor Squad with another squad and whatever else came in the box. I think it was a combat patrol for a while. Might still be, unless it's already gone from the store, which is entirely possible. How were people supposed to get hold of that easily? And is it the fact that people couldn't get hold of it easily maybe meant that it wasn't popular, in which case not many people played it, so, you know, why do we keep producing it? Well, I would argue that for a lot of people, the fact that it was a pain to get hold of contributed heavily to them not picking one up. Like, it won't have been ditched just for the sheer hell of it. My guess is that, frankly, it's just not worth making. But part of it being not worth making surely lies in the fact that you never got it off the ground to begin with. That was not an intentional pun, given that they, you know, fly, but I'll take it. It's just a weird sort of like, what did you expect to happen kind of situation? And it now means, you know, people who were using them, who did scrounge them off eBay or whatever, not wanting to buy a full box of like 20 guys for 3, they now aren't able to use them because they just never really became a thing. And I put a good amount of that on Games Workshop themselves. Also, they're being used as legendary proxies for an Inceptor squad. Okay, base size is the same. They're both 40mm. Inceptor squad has got 2 different weapon options. Neither of them resemble anything to do with the Suppressor squad. Also, the Suppressor squad, I'm pretty sure, isn't in Gravis. It's in Tacticus, but it's just got like the big like landing skid plates or whatever on the feet. It's just a weird way of doing it. I'm glad they're not like gone, but at the same time, it feels like they should stick around longer. I can't remember how old they are, but I would put money on it not being like more than 6 years. I mean, when did Shadow Spear come out? Because I'm pretty sure that's the box they started out in. Either way, it's not an old kit, and it feels odd to see it on a list of stuff that is frankly pretty goddamn venerable at this stage. Odd choice, weird all round. Now, when it comes to the actual Legends stuff, you got the Centurion Assault Squad, the Devastator Squad, the Razorback, the Destructor and Annihilator Predators, the Vindicator, the Whirlwind Dreadnought, and your 3 flying bricks of various sizes. and the Hammerfall bunker, which is another really odd decision. There are a couple of things on this list, the Hammerfall bunker included, that I am surprised they're getting rid of because there isn't an actual equivalent. I would say that the Vindicator is kind of surprising that that's going. The Stormhawk, the Stormtown, the Stormraven, again, I'm kind of surprised those are going. Not because they're not getting on a bit, because they are, but it's, well, 2 out of the 3. I'm pretty sure, is it the Stormhawk that is the more recent one of the 3? But I feel like there's not a direct equivalent to those. There just isn't one. Like, the Primaris line just does not have something that really matches what they do necessarily, unless there is the new speeder, the new speeder, which there's like 3 variants of that, so I can see that kind of standing in for maybe the Stormtown and the Stormhawk. But the Stormraven, that is a weird one to just ditch with no obvious replacement. Same thing with the Vindicator. There isn't really anything in the Primaris lineup that does what the Vindicator does, and yet it's disappearing. It's also odd to see the Rhino chassis as a whole being reduced to essentially just the Rhino. I mean, out of that list, what other variants are left? The only thing I can think of is there a Stalker as well? Like the anti-air one? That's not on the list. So that's maybe a couple of the Rhino chassis variants that are still left, but one of them is just the Rhino itself. So this is the other thing as well, by the way. Before we get onto the Hammerfall bunker, I have already seen, especially like Chaos players, kind of going, well, if they're getting rid of all of these for loyalists, what's going to happen to us? I wouldn't be hugely surprised if they did ditch some of this stuff for Chaos. I would be a lot more disappointed, though. And there would be... No, I'm a 50-50. I'm a 50-50. I wouldn't be massively surprised, but I would be surprised. Like, it wouldn't, like, take my breath away, but I would have pause and be like, why have you chosen to do that for this lot as well? When it comes to the separation between Heretic Astartes now and, you know, your loyalist Astartes, back in the day, the vehicles were very similar. There wasn't as much, like, delineation between the two, because, of course, it was Space Marines with spiky bits and bricks on treads, or Space Marines without spiky bits and, you know, bricks on treads. Now, I feel like the two ranges are really, really separated out. Like, the actual origin of the Chaos Space Marines has kind of been hidden somewhat with the introduction of all the Primaris stuff, and the Primaris stuff being primarily grav-focused and having a much more bulky look to it, thinking specifically because of, like, the Space Marine Captain on bike yesterday, the Outriders, the Chaplain, all of that stuff. There is a similar but different aesthetic to Chaos Space Marine vehicles. And the Chaos Space Marine vehicles at this point, even though quite a few of them are older, you know, you still got the Rhino, the Land Raider, the Predators, the Vindicator, they are also supplemented by things like the Defiler and the Hellbrute. And you've got things like the Hellstalker with the Lord Discordant. Those are all quite different when you compare them to what Space Marines have got going on, like when it comes to the majority of their units now. So the separation is a lot more significant. I think, like, back in the day, you could be forgiven, like, for glancing at a Space Marine and a Chaos Space Marine army side by side if they had a similar composition, and you might just think to yourself, I mean, they're different colours, but it looks like they're on the same side. Just to like a passing, you know, a passing civilian, stupid way to phrase it, but you know what I mean. Now that is very, very different. Like, you get rid of things like the Rhino chassis vehicles out of the Space Marine range, and how many things do they actually share anymore? Like, properly share. I'm not talking just sticking spikes on it. The Rhino, the Land Raider, that's it. Like, that takes that down simply to those two vehicles, I'm pretty sure. I can't think of any others off the top of my head anyway. Like, I don't think that they would ditch that stuff from Chaos Space Marines right when they get to the point where the actual difference between the two has been so heavily reinforced now that the Chaos Space Marines having those vehicles doesn't have any sort of impact on the Space Marines at all. I really hope that made sense. I'm not entirely sure that it did. Anyway, the standouts from the ones going to Legends, I mean, it's definitely the Vindicator, it's definitely the Stormraven and the Hammerfall bunker. We barely knew ye, What happened there? Why are they ditching that so early? That one is actually a little bit surprising. Although, of all of these, when it comes to shifting things over to legendary proxies, I'm actually surprised that they didn't do it for the Centurions, because the Centurion Devastator Squad, why can you not use those as aggressors? If you can use the Suppressor Squad, which is in different armour, with totally different armaments as an Inceptor Squad, and the Devastator Squad, which is, again, totally different in loadout as a Desolation Squad, why can't you use the Centurion Devastators as aggressors? Like, at the end of the day, the equivalence is really quite small for both of those ones that are actually, like, approved for it. We're talking big chunky lads with guns strapped to them. That's basically all it boils down to for the Suppressor / Inceptor comparison, and it's not that far off for the Devastator and Desolation Squad either. So I'm kind of surprised they didn't do that. I think the Centurions are on like a 50mm base as opposed to 40, but I'm pretty sure people would be happy to rebase them if they got to still use the thing they really like. I mean, what the hell is Paul is bad at stuff going to do now with all of his? What is he supposed to do with that? I'm not saying that, you know, taking, what was it, like 20 aggressors to a tournament is a good idea, but it just feels weird that, you know, those lines have been drawn, those lines of connection have been drawn, but not for another example that would make about as much sense as the ones they've actually done, you know? Weird. Just weird. Anyway, on a final, like, depressing note, right? If you are surprised by this, just remember, this has been kind of building up for years. Ever since Primaris were first introduced, if they'd have flopped and gone nowhere, then it would be surprising that Firstborn were being got rid of, like, today, now, in 2026. The tail end of it, at that, well, tail end, 2/3 of the way through. But remember this. This took ages. This took a long time for a lot of these kits to get, like, removed. This took a long time for these things to go into Legends. There are some kits here that frankly have been around for arguably a little bit too long without any sort of update or redesign. It could be worse. Now, this is maybe a weird way to, you know, bring a bit of positivity back, but it could be worse. Most of the stuff here that is being switched to Legendary Proxy or going to Legends is quite old. Remember, there was a time where Games Workshop took the entirety of the first wave of Stormcast Eternals, some kits barely a couple of years old, and relegated all of them to Legends. An entire army effectively displaced, no longer supported, because they hadn't quite finalised the design language of that range, and having done a slight update to the way they looked, decided to axe almost everything that was currently available for them. It could be worse. It could be worse. There's been warning. There's been build-up. It's still not nice, but at least it's not out of the blue. Because in the grand scheme of things, this approach, this like slow replacement, this building an equivalent, selling it, and then ditching the thing that came before it, yeah, it sucks to see if you've been around for a while, and there are armies that with this news will no longer be fully playable. But the signs were there. The warning was there. You didn't wake up one morning and find that almost everything that you had bought, built and painted was simply no longer relevant. Could always be worse. Could always be worse.